The road disappeared under snow miles ago. Only the mountain remained ahead. Cold, silent, endless. Elias tightened his coat as the wind screamed across the cliffs. The observatory stood at the top of the mountain like a dead monument. Its massive dome was covered in ice. Broken antennas pointed into the dark sky. No lights were visible anywhere. The locals in the nearest village refused to drive him here. One old man only said one thing before leaving: "Do not stay after sunset." Elias had heard stories like this before. Every abandoned place had rumors. Every empty building had ghosts people invented to explain fear. But this place felt different. Even the air seemed wrong. He stepped through the rusted front gate. The metal groaned loudly behind him. For a moment, the sound echoed too long across the mountain. Then silence returned. Elias raised his camera. Snow drifted through the dead courtyard. Satellite dishes stood frozen in place. Most of the windows were shattered. Something black was smeared across one wall beneath the dome. He moved closer. The marks looked old, burned into the concrete itself, 3 long lines, like claws. The main entrance was slightly open. The darkness inside waited motionless. Elias pushed the door slowly. A deep metallic creak echoed through the observatory halls. Dust covered everything inside. Old computers, collapsed shelves, rotting papers scattered across the floor. The smell hit him immediately: wet metal, mold, and something else underneath. Something rotten. He switched on his flashlight. The beam cut through the darkness carefully. A hallway stretched deeper into the building. At the far end stood a giant steel elevator. Its doors were half open. Elias approached slowly. The elevator had no power, but scratch marks covered the metal doors from the inside. Long, deep scratches, as if something had tried desperately to escape. A loud bang echoed somewhere above him. Elias froze. Another bang followed, metal against metal. Slow, heavy, coming from the dome overhead. He aimed the flashlight upward. Nothing moved, only darkness. The sound stopped suddenly. Elias forced himself to breathe normally. Probably loose equipment, wind pressure. Old buildings made noise all the time. At least that was what he told himself. He climbed the stairs toward the observatory dome. Each step groaned beneath his boots. The deeper he went, the colder the building became. Finally, he reached the top level. The dome chamber was enormous. The telescope still stood at its center. Covered in frost, pointing upward through the cracked ceiling. Snow drifted slowly into the room. Elias walked carefully around the machinery. Then he noticed something strange: fresh footprints. He stopped immediately. The prints crossed the snowy floor clearly. Someone had been here recently, but the tracks only moved in one direction, toward a small maintenance door near the back wall. None of the footprints returned. Elias stared at the door silently. The handle moved slightly on its own. A soft metallic click echoed inside the chamber. Then came the sound again, far below him this time. A heavy metallic slam, followed by something dragging slowly beneath the floor. Elias looked down. The sound continued underneath his feet. Slow, massive, deliberate, something was moving below the observatory. The dragging sound stopped without warning. Silence filled the dome again. Elias kept staring at the frozen floor beneath him. His flashlight trembled slightly in his hand. Then the maintenance door creaked open by itself, only a few inches. Darkness waited behind it. Elias stepped closer carefully. Cold air poured from the opening, far colder than the mountain outside. He pushed the door wider. A narrow staircase descended into darkness below the observatory. The smell rising from underneath was unbearable. Wet concrete, rust, and decay. Elias lifted his camera. The red recording light reflected faintly against the walls. He started down slowly. Every step echoed too loudly. The staircase ended inside a small archive room buried beneath the dome. Metal shelves filled the chamber from wall to wall. Most had collapsed onto the floor years ago. Papers were scattered everywhere. Elias picked up one yellowed newspaper clipping. Winter research team disappears on Mount Vale. Another clipping sat beside it. Government shuts down observatory after incident. Elias frowned. There were dozens more. Missing scientists, closed investigations, unexplained deaths. One article mentioned strange electrical failures across the mountain before the disappearance. Another claimed rescue teams heard voices underground during the storm. Elias continued searching. Near the back wall, he found a locked cabinet hanging open. Inside sat several cassette tapes labeled with dates from decades earlier. One tape had a warning written across it in red marker: "Do not open the lower tunnel." Elias inserted the tape into an old recorder nearby. Static exploded through the speakers first, then a tired voice appeared. "We can still hear it beneath us." The recording crackled violently. "It keeps moving closer every night." A second voice interrupted suddenly, panicked, shaking. "Seal the lower tunnel now." Loud banging echoed in the background of the tape. Not from the recording room, from somewhere far underground. The tape hissed louder. Then came one final sentence: "If anyone finds this, do not let it out." The recording ended abruptly. Silence returned. Elias slowly looked around the archive room. That was when he noticed the floor. A thick layer of dust covered everything, except for a single path crossing the room. Fresh footprints again, leading toward the far wall. Elias followed them carefully. At first the wall looked solid. Concrete, frozen pipes, nothing unusual. Then his flashlight revealed scratches near the corner. He pushed against the wall slowly. A hidden metal door shifted inward with a loud groan. Cold darkness opened behind it. A tunnel stretched deeper beneath the mountain. The walls inside were covered in rusted cables and dripping water. Tiny frozen footprints marked the floor ahead. Elias stepped closer carefully, then he heard breathing. Very faint, somewhere far inside the tunnel, not human breathing, much deeper, much larger. The lights overhead suddenly flickered once, then all power inside the archive room died completely. Darkness swallowed everything. Darkness consumed the archive room completely. Elias froze beside the hidden tunnel entrance. Only the weak beam of his flashlight remained alive. The breathing inside the tunnel stopped. For a moment, the mountain became completely silent. Then came the sound of static. Sharp, violent, close. The old tape recorder behind him turned back on by itself. Static screamed through the speakers. Elias slowly turned around. The machine had no power minutes earlier. Now the reels spun rapidly on their own. A distorted voice emerged through the noise. Elias. His blood turned cold instantly. The voice repeated his name again, longer this time, almost whispering. Elias. Elias backed away slowly. "That's not funny," he said. Only static answered him. Then another voice suddenly appeared beneath the distortion, a terrified woman crying, "It's inside the walls." The recording crackled violently. "We sealed the lower levels, but it keeps moving." A loud metallic impact exploded through the speakers. The woman screamed. The tape stopped abruptly. Silence returned again. Elias grabbed the recorder quickly. The reels were ice cold. Then every light inside the observatory flickered back on at once. The sudden brightness hurt his eyes. Somewhere above him, machinery groaned awake. The telescope dome was moving. Elias rushed upstairs immediately. The massive observatory chamber shook as ancient gears turned overhead. Snow fell through the opening dome ceiling. The giant telescope slowly rotated by itself toward the northern sky. "No," Elias whispered. The building had no electricity. It should not have been functioning at all. A loud radio burst echoed across the chamber. An old communication console near the wall suddenly activated. Static hissed through the speakers. Then came a voice. "Can anyone hear me?" The signal sounded weak, broken, ancient. Elias rushed toward it. "This is Elias Ward," he answered quickly. "I'm inside the observatory." Only static answered, then the voice returned. "Do not stay there after dark." The transmission crackled violently. "It knows your voice now." The signal died immediately. Outside, thunder rolled across the mountain. Elias looked through the broken dome ceiling. A massive snowstorm was moving toward the observatory fast. Within minutes, the mountain vanished beneath white fog and violent wind. Snow slammed against the windows. The road below disappeared completely. He was trapped. The observatory groaned loudly around him. Then came footsteps. Elias turned sharply. Someone was walking across the level below him, slow footsteps, crunching through snow inside the building. Elias aimed his flashlight down the staircase. Nothing stood there, but the footsteps continued, one at a time, circling beneath him. Elias descended slowly. His breathing became louder with every step. The lower hallway was empty. No movement, no shadows, only snow blowing through broken windows. Then he noticed the floor. Fresh footprints crossed the hallway again. Large footprints this time, far larger than before. They led toward the giant steel elevator. The elevator doors were now fully open. Darkness waited inside the shaft. Elias approached carefully. The flashlight beam disappeared into endless black below. Then something moved deep underneath him. Fast, a shape rushed downward through the shaft. Metal screamed violently below the observatory. The entire building shook. Then silence returned once more. Elias stared into the darkness, and far below him, something breathed back. The breathing echoed slowly through the elevator shaft. Deep, wet, unnatural. Elias stepped back immediately. His flashlight beam shook against the metal walls. Then the elevator doors slammed shut on their own. The impact thundered through the hallway. Elias nearly dropped the flashlight. A second later, the old elevator machinery groaned alive somewhere below. The elevator was moving, but there was no power. Elias stared at the floor indicator above the doors. The numbers flickered weakly. B3, B4, B5. The elevator kept descending deeper beneath the mountain, levels that should not have existed. Finally, the numbers stopped. B9. Silence followed. Then came a loud metallic ding. The elevator had arrived somewhere below. Elias backed away slowly. Every instinct told him to leave the building immediately. But the storm outside had become impossible. Snow blasted against the observatory walls like crashing waves. He was trapped here until morning, and something underground was awake. Minutes later, Elias returned to the hidden tunnel beneath the archive room. The narrow passage seemed even colder now. Water dripped steadily from rusted pipes overhead. The concrete walls were covered in black stains. He moved carefully through the darkness. The tunnel sloped downward for several minutes before opening into a larger corridor. Old emergency lights lined the ceiling. Most were dead. A few flickered weakly with pale red light. That was when Elias saw the marks. Claw marks, long grooves carved deep into solid concrete. Some stretched across entire walls, others covered the ceiling itself, as if something enormous had crawled through the corridor. Elias swallowed nervously. The deeper he went, the stranger the tunnel became. Old warning signs appeared on the walls. Authorized personnel only. Biohazard clearance required. Another sign had been scratched apart violently. Something suddenly clanged in the darkness ahead. Elias stopped walking instantly. A shape moved briefly at the far end of the corridor, tall, thin, gone in seconds. "Hello?" Elias called carefully. No answer came back, only distant dripping water. He continued forward slowly until he reached a massive steel door standing partially open. Cold air poured from inside. Elias pushed the door wider. A huge underground chamber appeared beyond it. The room looked like a hidden research facility buried beneath the mountain. Rows of dead computers lined the walls. Medical beds sat overturned across the floor. Large generators hummed faintly somewhere deeper inside. Somehow, parts of the chamber still had power. Elias moved between the abandoned equipment carefully. Papers covered every desk. Most were ruined by water damage, but one message was repeated again and again across dozens of pages. "It hears us through the walls." Another page read, "Do not respond to the voices." Elias felt the air growing colder around him. Then he noticed the photographs hanging beside one workstation, old staff pictures, astronomers, scientists, engineers. Every face had been scratched out violently. Except one. A woman standing beside the telescope controls. Someone had written beneath her picture in black ink. She opened the lower door. Suddenly the generators flickered. The chamber lights dimmed. Then all power died again. Darkness swallowed the underground facility. Elias lifted his flashlight quickly. The beam swept across the room. Empty desks, broken machines, frosted walls. Then the light stopped. A figure stood at the far end of the chamber, perfectly still, watching him. Elias couldn't see its face clearly, only its shape, too tall, too thin. Its arms hung almost to the floor, the flashlight flickered once, and the figure vanished. Elias rushed toward the far end of the chamber. Nothing was there, only darkness, and freezing air drifting through the underground facility. He turned slowly with the flashlight raised. Every corner of the chamber felt occupied, as if something stood just outside the beam, watching him move. Then the generators suddenly restarted. The lights flickered weakly overhead. Rows of dead monitors blinked back to life one by one. Static filled the chamber. Elias approached the nearest computer carefully. An old security file had opened automatically on the screen. Project Veil, restricted access. Below it sat hundreds of classified documents. Elias opened the first file. The observatory had not been built for astronomy alone. Decades earlier, researchers detected unusual signals coming from deep beneath the mountain. At first, they believed the sounds were natural seismic activity, but the patterns repeated too perfectly, almost like communication. The deeper they drilled underground, the stronger the signals became. Then workers started disappearing. Elias continued reading. Several staff members reported hearing voices inside empty corridors. Others claimed they heard family members speaking through the walls at night. One scientist wrote the same sentence repeatedly across an entire report. "It learns our voices." Elias opened another file. Security footage appeared on the monitor. Grainy black and white video showed the underground chamber years earlier. Scientists moved between computers nervously while alarms echoed in the background. Then the camera shook violently. Something massive slammed against the walls somewhere beyond the room. Several people began screaming. One man pointed toward the darkness behind the generators. A shape moved there briefly, tall, distorted, wrong. The footage cut to static instantly. Elias leaned closer to the monitor. The static slowly shifted. At first it looked random. Then a face appeared inside the distortion for a split second. Pale eyes, an open mouth, watching him directly. Elias stepped back immediately. Every monitor in the chamber suddenly switched on at once. Dozens of screens filled with static. Then the same message appeared across every display. "Do not go lower," the words vanished seconds later. The generators groaned loudly nearby. Something moved behind them. Elias swung the flashlight toward the shadows. A low sound echoed from the darkness. Not breathing this time. Whispering, hundreds of whispers overlapping together, too distorted to understand. The voices grew louder. Elias backed away slowly, then one whisper suddenly became clear. "Elias." He froze instantly. The voice sounded exactly like his mother, soft, gentle, impossible. "Come downstairs." Elias stared into the darkness behind the generators. The whisper came again. "We found something beautiful." His chest tightened painfully. His mother had died years ago. The chamber lights flickered violently, then a loud crash exploded somewhere deeper underground. The floor trembled beneath him. Dust fell from the ceiling pipes. Another impact followed. Closer this time, something enormous was moving below the facility. The whispers stopped immediately. Then came silence, a terrible silence. Elias slowly turned toward the far side of the chamber. At the end of the room stood a massive circular opening in the floor. A drilling shaft. The darkness inside seemed endless. Cold air drifted upward from below, and somewhere deep beneath the mountain, something began climbing toward him. A metallic sound echoed from deep inside the shaft. Clang. Then another, closer. Elias stepped backward slowly. His flashlight remained fixed on the darkness below. Something was climbing upward. Heavy movement scraped against the walls of the shaft. Steel groaned beneath the weight. Clang. Another impact shook the chamber floor. Dust rained from the ceiling pipes overhead. Elias searched desperately for another exit, but the underground chamber had only one visible doorway behind him, and the sounds below were getting faster. The whispers returned suddenly. Soft voices drifted from the shaft itself. Dozens at once, crying, begging, laughing quietly. Then one voice rose above the others. "Don't leave me here." Elias froze. The voice sounded exactly like his younger brother. Impossible. His brother had disappeared years earlier during a hiking trip in the north. No body was ever found. The voice came again. "Please." Elias felt himself stepping closer to the shaft without realizing it. The whispers became warmer, gentler, almost comforting. Then his flashlight beam reached deeper into the darkness below, and he saw movement, massive shapes twisting slowly against the shaft walls far beneath him. Not one shape, several. Long limbs unfolding unnaturally as they climbed upward together. Elias stumbled backward instantly. The whispers changed at once. Their tone became angry, distorted. "Come back." The chamber lights exploded violently overhead. Darkness swallowed the facility again. Only the flashlight remained. Then the emergency radio near the wall crackled alive. A panicked voice burst through the static. "Leave now." Elias rushed toward the radio. "Who is this?" he shouted. Static screamed through the speaker. Then the voice returned. "It mimics people you trust." The signal broke repeatedly. "It gets inside your head." A loud scraping noise echoed directly beneath the floor. The voice on the radio became terrified. "It's almost upstairs." The transmission died instantly. A second later, something slammed against the underside of the chamber floor. The impact nearly knocked Elias down. Another slam followed, closer to the shaft. The metal railings bent slightly inward. Elias aimed the flashlight downward again. At first he saw only darkness. Then two pale shapes appeared far below. Eyes, enormous eyes, staring upward without blinking. The flashlight flickered violently. The eyes vanished. But the climbing continued, faster now. Metal screamed from inside the shaft walls. Elias turned and ran toward the exit corridor. Behind him, something pulled itself over the edge of the shaft. Then he heard wet limbs dragging across the chamber floor, but he did not look back. The emergency lights flashed red throughout the tunnel as Elias sprinted through the underground corridor. Warning alarms suddenly activated overhead. A mechanical voice echoed through the facility. "Containment failure detected, containment failure detected." The whispers followed him through the tunnel, closer with every second, different human voices overlapping together endlessly, some crying, some laughing, some screaming his name. Elias reached the corridor intersection and stopped suddenly. Fresh claw marks covered the walls ahead, huge claw marks, still wet. Then a shadow moved slowly across the red emergency light at the far end of the tunnel. Tall, unnaturally thin. Its head brushed the ceiling pipes as it crawled forward silently. And then it spoke, using Elias's own voice. "Why are you running?" Elias ran blindly through the corridor. The emergency lights flashed red behind him. Alarms screamed through the underground tunnels. But the thing followed calmly. Slow, dragging movements echoed behind the walls, not rushing, hunting. Elias reached a heavy steel door and slammed himself against it. The door burst open instantly. He stumbled into another underground room and locked the entrance behind him. Silence followed. Only his breathing remained. The room was small. Old storage shelves lined the walls. Cans of emergency supplies sat untouched beneath thick dust. Someone had been living here recently. Blankets covered one corner. Empty food containers lay scattered across the floor. A lantern glowed faintly beside a rusted desk. Elias slowly lowered the flashlight. Then a voice spoke behind him. "You should not have come down here." Elias spun around instantly. An old man stood near the shadows, holding a revolver. His beard was overgrown. His face looked pale and exhausted. One eye twitched constantly, but the worst part was his expression. Pure terror. The man kept the weapon aimed directly at Elias. "How long has it been following you?" he asked quietly. Elias struggled to answer. "What is that thing?" The old man said nothing for several seconds. Then he locked the door behind Elias more tightly. "It hears everything," he whispered. The alarms outside suddenly stopped. The silence became unbearable. The old man slowly approached the desk. Dozens of handwritten notes covered the surface. Most contained the same warning repeated again and again. "Do not answer the voices." Elias stared at the papers. You worked here?" he asked. The man nodded once. "Dr. Leon Vey." Elias recognized the name immediately. Leon Vey had been the lead scientist during the final winter research mission. Official records claimed he disappeared with the others decades earlier, but he had survived. "You've been hiding here this whole time?" Elias asked. Leon laughed weakly. "Hiding doesn't matter anymore." He walked toward a cracked security monitor in the corner. The screen showed grainy footage from the observatory above. Snowstorms covered the mountain outside completely, but shapes moved through the white darkness, huge shapes. Elias stepped closer to the screen slowly. At first, they looked human. Then one passed beneath a floodlight briefly, its limbs bent wrong, far too long, dragging behind it through the snow. Leon switched the monitor off immediately. It moves easier during storms," he whispered. Elias looked back at him. "There's more than one." Leon remained silent. That silence answered everything. The room suddenly trembled slightly. A deep metallic impact echoed somewhere far above them. Leon's face turned pale instantly. "It's inside the upper levels now," he whispered. Elias stepped closer. "What exactly did you find down here?" Leon stared at the floor for several seconds before answering. "We thought it was a signal." His hands shook violently. A voice from beneath the earth. The lantern flickered weakly beside them. Leon continued quietly. "We drilled too deep beneath the mountain." His eyes slowly lifted toward Elias. "And something answered us." The lights in the room suddenly dimmed. A soft voice drifted through the ventilation shaft overhead. Leon." The old man froze instantly. The voice sounded like a young woman, gentle, familiar. Tears filled Leon's eyes immediately. "No," he whispered. The voice came again. "Please open the door." Elias watched the scientist step backward in fear. "That's my wife's voice," Leon whispered shakily. The whisper continued through the vent. "Leon, it's cold outside." Something scraped slowly across the ventilation shaft above them. Metal bent softly under enormous weight. Leon raised the revolver toward the ceiling with trembling hands. Then the thing inside the vent laughed quietly, using Leon's own voice. The laugh inside the ventilation shaft did not stop. It repeated in short, broken echoes, like something learning how to be human. Leon kept the revolver aimed at the ceiling. His hands were shaking violently now. "Don't listen to it," he whispered. Elias stepped closer to him. "We need to move, now." Leon didn't respond. The ventilation cover above them slowly bent inward. Metal screws popped loose one by one. Something was forcing its way through. Then suddenly, the entire room lights flickered on. Not dim emergency lighting, full power. Bright white lights flooded the underground room. Elias froze. "That's impossible," he said. Leon looked even more terrified now. "No power source reaches this level." A loud mechanical hum echoed through the walls. The entire underground facility had come alive again. Above them, deep systems began activating one after another. Old machinery, hidden systems, locked research equipment, all powering on at the same time. Leon ran to the monitor and turned it back on. The screen showed the observatory above. But something had changed. The telescope dome was rotating again, slowly, as if searching the sky. Elias stared at the screen. "It's controlling the observatory." Leon shook his head. "No," his voice cracked. "It's waking it up." A loud alarm suddenly echoed through both underground and upper levels. But this alarm was different, not warning. Activation, the system voice returned. Clearance level override initiated. Leon slammed the console. "No, no, 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 this is not supposed to happen." Elias grabbed him. "What did you trigger?" Leon's eyes were filled with panic. "I didn't trigger it." He pointed at the screen. "It did." On the monitor, the observatory dome fully rotated toward the storm outside. Then all exterior lights turned on across the mountain structure. For the first time in decades, the observatory was fully awake. Elias saw movement outside through the camera feed. Figures, walking across the snowstorm around the building. Too many to count. Leon whispered quietly. "They're responding to it." The ventilation shaft above them finally broke open. Metal ripped apart violently. Something dropped inside the room. But they didn't see it clearly. The lights flickered for just 1 second. And it was gone. Only wet, dragging sounds remained moving across the ceiling. Leon fired a shot upward. The sound echoed through the entire facility, then everything stopped. Silence returned. For a brief moment, Elias thought it was over. Then the monitor changed. A new feed appeared automatically. Deep underground, far below even their level, a massive sealed chamber was opening slowly, ancient mechanical locks disengaging one by one. Leon's face turned pale instantly. "Oh no," he whispered. "That level was never supposed to open." Elias looked at him. "What's down there?" Leon didn't answer. Instead, he stepped back slowly. Because from the monitor speakers, a new voice began speaking, not mimicking anymore, not copying. A real voice, old, heavy, patient. "We are awake now." The entire observatory structure shook violently. Somewhere deep below them, the final door had opened. The underground room trembled continuously. Dust poured from the ceiling vents. Pipes rattled violently inside the walls. On the monitor, the ancient chamber door continued opening slowly. Cold black darkness waited beyond it. Leon backed away from the screen in horror. "They promised they sealed it forever," he whispered. Elias grabbed his arm. "What is that place?" Leon stared silently at the opening chamber for several seconds. Then he finally answered. "The first drilling site." The room lights flickered again. Long shadows stretched across the walls behind them. Leon continued shakily. "When we reached the lowest cavern, we found structures already buried there." Elias frowned. "What kind of structures?" Leon swallowed hard. "Not human." The monitor crackled with static briefly. Images flashed across the screen too quickly to understand. Ancient tunnels, massive stone pillars beneath the mountain, symbols carved into black rock walls. Then one image remained frozen. A gigantic steel door covered in strange markings. The same door now opening below them. "It was already there before we arrived," Leon whispered. "We only uncovered it." Elias leaned closer to the screen. The symbols covering the door looked ancient. Curved lines twisting together unnaturally. Some almost resembled eyes. Others looked like warnings. Then Elias noticed something worse. The marks on the steel matched the claw marks upstairs. Exactly. A loud metallic boom echoed somewhere above them. The observatory shook harder this time. Leon looked toward the ceiling nervously. "It's moving through the upper halls now." Suddenly, every monitor in the room switched feeds at once. Dozens of camera angles filled the screens. The observatory corridors above, snow blowing through broken windows, empty hallways, flashing emergency lights. Then movement appeared on one screen. A tall figure crossed the main lobby slowly, its body bent wrong beneath the flickering lights, its arms dragged behind it unnaturally. Then another figure appeared, and another. Elias stared in disbelief. "There are dozens of them." Leon shook his head slowly. No." His voice barely rose above a whisper. "That's not dozens." The screen suddenly filled with static again, then the same message appeared across every monitor. "Return below. Return below, return below." The words flashed faster and faster until the screens went black entirely. Silence followed. Then came a distant sound from the hallway outside the room. Footsteps. Slow footsteps approaching the door. Leon immediately turned off the lantern. Darkness swallowed the room. The footsteps stopped directly outside. Elias held his breath. Something scratched softly against the metal door. Then a familiar voice spoke from the hallway. "Elias." It was his own voice again, perfectly identical. "You left the lower door open." Leon covered his mouth tightly. The thing outside continued speaking calmly. "You have to come back downstairs." The voice sounded almost normal now, almost human. Then another voice joined it. Leon's wife. "We're waiting for you." Soft laughter echoed outside the door, not one voice laughing, many voices together. Elias slowly backed away. The scratching against the door became heavier, long claws dragging across metal. Then the entire room lights suddenly turned red. A hidden speaker activated overhead. "Lowest level breach detected, lowest level breach detected." Leon closed his eyes in terror, but Elias looked back toward the dead monitors, because for one brief second, one screen came alive again, and deep beneath the mountain, Something enormous was rising from the open chamber. The screen flickered violently. Static swallowed most of the image, but Elias still saw enough. Something massive moved inside the cavern below, far too large to be human. Its shape shifted unnaturally through the darkness, long limbs unfolding slowly against the stone walls. Then the monitor died completely. Outside the room, the scratching against the metal door stopped. Silence returned. Leon whispered only one sentence. It reached the surface. A second later, the observatory lights failed again. Darkness consumed everything. Then came a deafening roar from somewhere above the mountain. Not animal, not mechanical, ancient. The sound shook the entire underground facility violently. Elias nearly lost balance as pipes burst overhead. Freezing water sprayed across the floor. Then the emergency lights flashed back on. Red light flooded the room like blood. The door outside suddenly bent inward. Metal groaned under enormous pressure. Something huge stood in the hallway. Elias and Leon backed away together. Another impact hit the door harder. The center dented deeply inward this time. A long claw slowly pierced through the metal from the other side. Black liquid dripped from it onto the floor. Leon raised the revolver with shaking hands. It found us. The claw withdrew, then the hallway became silent again. Too silent. Elias stared at the motionless door. "What is it doing?" he whispered. Leon's face turned pale. Listening. Then the ceiling vents above them began whispering softly. Hundreds of voices together. Children, women, men, all overlapping endlessly. "Open the door. Let us inside. We came back for you." The whispers spread through every wall around them. Elias covered his ears, but then one voice rose above all the others. His own voice, perfectly calm. "You already saw us downstairs." The door handle slowly turned from the outside. The lock snapped open by itself. Leon fired instantly. The gunshot exploded through the room. The door swung open violently, but nothing stood there, only the red emergency hallway beyond. Empty. Leon breathed heavily, then something moved across the ceiling above the doorway. Fast, too fast to fully see. A huge shape crawled silently overhead and vanished into darkness again. Elias caught only pieces of it. Pale skin stretched too tightly across bone. Limbs bending backward, a face with no eyes. Then it disappeared completely. The facility alarm suddenly stopped all at once. Every sound vanished. No whispers. No machinery, nothing. Even the storm outside had ended. Leon slowly approached the hallway. Snow no longer blew through the broken windows upstairs on the camera feeds. The mountain had become perfectly still. Then Elias noticed something terrifying through one remaining active monitor. Outside the observatory, the snow around the building was moving, not from wind, from shapes beneath it, huge shapes crawling silently under the frozen surface surrounding the entire mountain. Leon stepped backward in horror. They're everywhere now. Then the main observatory lights suddenly turned on above them. Bright white light flooded every hallway feed, and standing inside the upper dome was a gigantic shadow reaching almost to the ceiling. Motionless, waiting. The giant shadow inside the dome did not move. It simply stood there beneath the telescope. Too tall, too wide, its shape shifting slowly in the bright white light. Elias stared at the monitor without breathing. Leon whispered beside him, "That's the original one." The screen crackled softly. For a split second, the massive shape appeared closer to the camera, even though it had not moved. Then the feed went black. Every monitor died at once. The underground room fell silent again. Leon grabbed Elias suddenly. "There's still one chance." He pointed toward the upper levels. "The transmission tower." Elias frowned. "What?" Leon rushed toward the doorway nervously. "The observatory can still broadcast emergency signals." He looked back at Elias with terrified eyes. "If anyone is close to this mountain, they need warning." Another deep roar echoed somewhere above them. Closer this time, dust fell heavily from the ceiling. The creature was moving again. Elias followed Leon into the hallway immediately. The underground tunnels felt different now, warmer. The walls pulsed softly beneath the emergency lights, almost breathing. The whispers had returned too, but quieter now. Patient, like they already knew escape was impossible. Leon guided Elias through maintenance corridors toward the surface stairs. Every hallway showed signs of destruction. Metal doors ripped from hinges, deep claw marks across concrete. Black liquid smeared along the floors. Then Elias noticed bodies. Shapes lying motionless beneath emergency blankets. Old bodies. Scientists. Decades old, yet somehow perfectly preserved by the freezing underground air. Their faces looked terrified. Most still covered their own ears with frozen hands. Leon refused to look at them. "They listened to the voices," he whispered. Suddenly the observatory speakers activated overhead. Static flooded the corridors. Then came Elias's voice. "Come upstairs." Elias stopped walking instantly. The voice continued calmly through the speakers. "We've been waiting for you." Leon grabbed him harder. "Don't answer it." The speakers crackled again, then dozens of other voices joined together. Children laughing, women crying, men screaming in pain, all merging into one impossible sound. The lights flickered violently. Something huge moved across the hallway intersection ahead. Just a silhouette, tall enough to scrape the ceiling pipes. Elias and Leon froze. The shape paused in the darkness briefly. Then it crawled sideways into another corridor and vanished silently. Leon whispered shakily, "It's herding us." They continued climbing toward the upper observatory. Finally, they reached the main transmission room beside the giant dome. Old communication equipment filled the chamber. Most of it had somehow powered on again. Static hissed from every speaker. Elias rushed toward the main console. The broadcast system still worked. He grabbed the microphone quickly. "My name is Elias Ward," he said breathlessly. The speakers crackled loudly. "I'm at Mount Vale Observatory." The lights dimmed around him. "There's something under this mountain." Static interrupted the message violently. Elias continued anyway. "Do not come here. Whatever we found underground is alive." Then a new voice suddenly emerged through the speakers beside him, his own voice again, perfectly identical. "But you already opened the door." Elias stepped away from the microphone in horror. The transmission room lights shut off instantly. Darkness swallowed everything except the faint white glow from the observatory dome nearby. Then came a sound beneath them. A massive sound, something enormous dragging itself upward through the center of the building. Leon slowly raised the flashlight toward the dome entrance, and from the darkness beyond the doorway, Elias heard his own voice whisper softly, "Come downstairs." The whisper echoed through the dark transmission room. "Come downstairs." Elias backed away from the doorway slowly. His flashlight trembled in his hand. Leon stood frozen beside him. Then the entire observatory shook violently. A deafening metallic scream echoed from below as something enormous forced itself upward through the center of the structure. The telescope dome above began opening completely. Cold moonlight poured inside. And every light across the observatory suddenly turned toward the mountain below, as if guiding something upward. Leon grabbed Elias hard. "There's only one way to stop it," he whispered. Elias looked at him. Leon's terrified eyes filled with tears. "We have to close the lower door." Another impact shook the building. The floor beneath the dome cracked slightly open. Long black claws slowly emerged through the metal. Elias stared in horror. "They're already inside." Leon nodded weakly. They were always inside. Without another word, Leon ran toward the underground staircase. Elias followed immediately. The observatory around them sounded alive now. The walls groaned like breathing lungs. Whispers poured endlessly through the vents. The deeper they descended, the warmer the air became. Not natural warmth, but the warmth of something living beneath the earth. Emergency lights flashed across the tunnels as they reached the lower facility again. Most corridors had collapsed entirely. Black liquid covered the floors. Huge claw marks split concrete walls apart. Then Elias stopped walking. The underground chamber ahead was gone. The drilling shaft had expanded into a massive open cavern beneath the mountain. The floor itself had collapsed inward, and far below, an entire hidden world stretched beneath the ice. Ancient black structures covered the cavern floor endlessly. Tower-like shapes disappeared into darkness miles below. Strange glowing symbols pulsed across stone walls. The place looked older than civilization itself. Thousands of bones covered the cavern ground, human bones, animal bones, some far too massive to identify. Elias felt his chest tighten painfully. "This place," he whispered. Leon stared into the abyss silently. It was here long before us. Then the whispers below stopped completely. Silence consumed the cavern, and something moved in the darkness beneath the ancient city. At first, Elias thought the ground itself was shifting. Then he realized he was seeing a colossal body slowly rising beneath the ruins. Its shape could not fully fit inside the cavern. Endless pale limbs unfolded upward through the darkness. Hundreds of eyes opened slowly across its surface, some human, some not. Elias could not breathe. The creature had never been trapped inside the mountain. The mountain had been built over it. Leon stepped toward the edge of the cavern weakly. "We woke it up," he whispered, and then the ancient symbols across the cavern walls suddenly illuminated together. The creature began speaking, not through whispers anymore, directly inside Elias's mind, thousands of human voices speaking as one. "We remember your kind." Elias dropped the flashlight. The light spun across the cavern walls wildly. For one brief second, he saw countless human faces moving beneath the creature's skin, still alive, still screaming silently. Leon suddenly pushed Elias backward hard. "Run!" he screamed. The cavern floor exploded upward instantly. Darkness swallowed everything. The camera hit the ground violently. The final recording captured only shaking shadows, endless screaming, and one last enormous eye opening in the dark. Then the transmission cut to silence.